All right, good afternoon. Everybody still awake?
Yeah.
Long day, brains exploding. My name is Jordan Miller. I am the Director of Worship Arts at Our Savior Lutheran Church in Norfolk, Nebraska. This session is on modern worship keys and tracks. It's going to be a little bit of gear knowledge. There's going to be a lot to cover in this. As I was making slides for this, I'm like, wow, I really have to attack this from a lot of different angles. So I'm going to probably take the whole session, look at it 45 minutes of just keys stuff, and then hopefully maybe 45 minutes of tracks stuff that way. If you need to, stop me. Otherwise, I might just say I'm keeping going, and we'll hopefully have a little bit of time for questions at the end. I did this with my wife, this presentation, and I lost her. But she's also not a musician, so take it as it may. That was good knowledge. Speaking of my wife, this is my beautiful family and me. So these are my two kids and my lovely wife. They're awesome and a big support for me. This is my church. This is Our Savior Lutheran Church in Norfolk, Nebraska. Just 3 years ago, we renovated a Budweiser warehouse into a church. Yes. So they used to ship out in and out. It was a processing plant. So the whole worship center area connect would be all the trucks that would drive through that would bring in all the cases of beer. Now we ship out believers in and out of there, not just beer, which is good. And I always get the question, did they leave any? No, they did not leave any. The whole back end was freezer. We've warmed it up since then, but it's a blessing to serve there. This has done great wonders for us in our ministry. My 15 minutes of fame, if you will, was being on the Churchfront channel. Any fans of Churchfront? 4 of you. Awesome. Glad to know. I got to meet Jake Goslin, and he's a really great guy. Churchfront is for worship leaders and those who just like tech gear for worship. They came to our church and did a video on the 2 different worship styles that we do. In that big warehouse, we were able to build a worship center for our contemporary services, and then also a sanctuary for our traditional services that are right across the lobby from each other. Because we do have services that happen simultaneously, and then when they end at the same time, the people are still one people. So we get to be one church with 2 different worship styles. So it's a super long, nerdy video where we go through every piece of gear that we set up with the help of House Right Productions out of Kentucky, our integrators. But it was well worth it. And meeting Jake was, dream come true for a worship leader, if you will. I want to get into some scripture and why we do what we do from 1 Peter 4:10. Each of you should use whatever gift you have received to serve others as faithful stewards of God's grace in its various form. If anyone speaks, they should do so. Those who speaks, every word of God. If anyone serves, they should do so with strength. If anyone plays keyboard, they should do so well. If anybody sings, if anybody plays organ. So that in all things, right, everything that we do in worship ministry, God may be praised through Jesus Christ. To Him be the glory forever and ever. And all God's people said, Amen. And then a great quote, everybody loves this one, by Martin Luther. Next to the Word of God, music deserves the highest praise. Right? That's why we get to be church musicians. The gift of language combined with the gifts of songs and sounds was given to man that they should proclaim the Word of God through music. Music gets to be a messenger that carries the message, right? It gets to we want to point towards the words of God all the time, point to Scripture, the words that the pastors are going to say, and we just get to be that special carrier in our different sizes and cultures and styles of music. So here's what we're going to touch on. What do we mean by modern, right? The modern worship keys. What do we mean by modern? Why do we say keys and not piano? And then I'm going to dive into some tools that I use, that I recommend, that I've been getting into to help our modern worship keys sound. So what do we mean by modern? Here's the definition of modern: relating to the present or recent times as opposed to the remote past. A lot of times when you think modern, what does that really mean? It can mean various things, but that's the actual definition. So really it has less to do with the sound, right? And more of the operation or the way that we do things, right? Because even you can have digital software, different things. You can have an organ, right? Have you seen stuff like this? This would be a modern organ, right? This is an aside. I'm not getting into this, but this is a free program you can download. German company called Hauptwerk. That's how they designed this. made everything. So it does the same thing as this, right? Same sounds, but this is the way to operate it. And Hauptwerk actually uses recorded pipes from places in Europe, and it sounds really authentic. I ran it through a keyboard kind of like this in a big arena with a big sound system, and it sounded like a cathedral. So modern, right? It's the way we do it, not kind of describing what it is. Because if somebody asks you, what is a modern sandwich? What would you say?
Kale.
Kale? I don't know. The one I made today, right? I Googled modern sandwich, and this is what came up. Combination of cultures, maybe. Different flavors. This one came up as modern grilled cheese. They put it on top and grilled it. I don't know if that's good or not. Maybe that's kale. I don't know. But does the modern part really matter? I mean, it's a descriptive word that we use that really doesn't tell a whole lot. So kind of moving past modern, it goes by recent times. So it's the way we make sounds, not just the sounds themselves, because you can do organ even in a modern way. Something that's a long time old. So second part, why do we say keys and not piano? We still use a key bed when we play a lot of piano things, but we don't utilize the same sounds. And we're not always restricted to one sound. A lot of times you can do multiple sounds, right? For a long time, as keyboards and digital technology was getting better, they would load these babies with sounds, right? Some of them not sounding like a violin or trumpet or viola or some squeaky thing, but those are some different sounds. What do we play? Do we play sheet music? I get this a lot. So if I'm a keys player, what am I supposed to play? Right? I get that a lot. Do I use sheet music to play keys? Do I use chord charts, or do I just play a pad? Anybody had a worship leader say, just play a pad? Right? Just play a pad. And that's not always fun or enjoyable, or you don't feel like you're a piece of the puzzle, but it's a sound layer. And there's some different things we'll get into when we talk about pads, different things like that. So to answer the question, what do we play? I get asked a lot, I'm someone who reads sheet music. How do I transition to maybe if my band is playing chord charts? Because I don't know a whole lot of guitarists, especially that are playing, regular bar music or even worship music, that play to sheet music, right? They can play to lead sheet, they can play different things like that, but a lot of them are just going to know their shapes. So how do I transition to that? I called one of my buddies. He's a professor over at Concordia Irvine. His name is Steve Young. This is his work. I asked for permission. And he said, don't print it off and hand it to everybody. I'm sorry, you'll have to call him. But he said you can put it on slides. So I'm going to ask my buddy Chase to come up, help me with this, since he can quickly play and I can talk and not have to do two things. And there's no pedal, so imagine. So what this does is this is talking about different inversions. So sorry, I'll have you squeeze for a second. Right. So he's playing D. So when a chord chart, when a piano player sees that chord, right, there are many different ways to play D. And in the style of music that we're playing a lot of times in contemporary worship, it comes from a jazz point of view, right, which isn't exactly note for note all the time. In fact, sometimes when these bands write these songs, they're not always given specific notes. There's places like praisecharts.com or different places that they fine-tuned and written sheet music for it, but a lot of it's up to the interpreter of the musician, and that gives us freedom. So if you see a D, none of these are wrong. And those are the different versions, each having its own sound and different flavor. Here's the G ones. Right? And so now you can combine different sounds. So Chase, play both third measure shapes.
Together?
Play just the D1 first, and then the G1. Right? So you have different transitions. So now go from this one to this one. Right? So a little more simpler voice leading. So those are the kind of things that I get as a first exercise for someone who's maybe starting from a place where I can only read sheet music as a piano, to giving you the freedom to choose which chords you might want. And now this is very easy, but then you build from there, right? So you start with simple chords or things like that. Example 2 is broken inversions. And these are different ways that you can play it. So play just through the D line. Right? Different inversions and different ways to play. But if you switched between, let's make it easy on you. Just do the second measure and then the second measure G, going back and forth. Yeah. So kind of picking between the two, you can select which maybe ones work for you, right? So you're not just saying play a D chord, maybe in root position, that's what they're thinking immediately, but then you give them the option to choose. So these are different exercises to do that. Exercise 3, building off that, now you have arpeggiated inversions. Each having its own distinguishing flavor. So I like this one. Let's do that one and measure 3 of G. So you kind of get that high to low contrast. Maybe switch it, go to these two. So it has a little bit of flavor. But each of those you can kind of select versions. You guys kind of getting it now? All right. Then you have what's called voice leading. So now we have a full chord progression going through the key of D that goes like this. Go ahead and play through it. And what he's doing with the left hand is just playing the root then of each of those shapes, lead sheet, kind of like that. So that's a good way to voice lead. And what that's doing is it's keeping you around the same so you don't have to move a lot of your hand. You can make it easy so you're not making huge crazy jumps, and they're leading into each chord using some of the common tones, right? Common tones here being there's all these Ds, and then finally go into C sharp. So it's an easy way to kind of locate. So especially as I was learning, I learned piano the wrong way. I'll be the first to admit. I just kind of learned by ear because nobody really taught me how to play. And then I got to college and was like, oh, this is how you play piano. But I found that in this song, in the key of D, pretty much every chord has a D in it, to some extent. So if I don't have to move that, and this is how guitarists think a little bit too. If I don't have to move that finger, I'm already halfway there, or a third of the way there if you're looking at chords. A third of the way there. So I can keep that D note there, and then I just move the other two, or sometimes just one, right? Just moving one in a different place. So moving up, this is common tones. Kind of like I said, you can keep some of those same notes in between each. So play that top line. So here we're borrowing the A, which is the 7th of B minor, right? So we can keep a common tone because it still fits throughout the chord progression. Still having those Ds. Play this bottom one now too, because this keeps the high D in there. Okay, so keeping common tones, you're still filling out the rest of the chord. Now, do you have to play all the notes of the chord when you see the chord? Good, I see a lot of shaking heads. No, you don't have to. In fact, this is the economy version. You don't have to play all the notes. And play the bottom one. Does that sound familiar? This is Clocks by Coldplay. That's what they did. They take the economy, they keep the same notes, you have melodic interest, you fit in the terms of the band. You're not muddying it up because you have a lot of space, and you're still playing these chords. Now, we heard this same progression a lot of different ways, and a lot of different ways to play it. Depending on your style, your speed, your tempo, where the rest of your band is playing, you can take each of these concepts to understand what to play. Does that make sense? Any questions on that? I have a spot here to pause. I'm playing keys. Yes?
So, if you're playing a piece like that has these chords in it,
Uh-huh.
and you're rehearsing with the band, and you think, well, this would really sound good if I threw a ninth in there.
Yeah. That's the beauty of the jazz chord. If you throw the ninth in there, and your leader doesn't say, that doesn't fit, because 9 times out of 10, it'll fit, because it's the ninth of the chord. Throw it in there. There's no authority busting into your church saying, they played a ninth, kick them out, right? So it's all part of it. In fact, yeah, or two. If you're a guitar player, right? If you're a piano player, it's the ninth. So, thank you, Chase. Thank you, Chase, for reading music for me much faster. So, like you're saying, and a lot of times what I'll do, so this is a D chord and root position, I do what's kind of called the 2-4 method, which if you throw the second or the fourth in, you get that jazzy, full, modern sound, right? Where it's pleasing to our 20th century ears, 21st century ears, as we go through each of those chords. Now it can also get muddy, like that G9, B minor 7. If you have an electric guitar player jamming down there and an acoustic player jamming down there, and the bass player decides to play up a little bit, you're all going to be right here. And it's going to sound a little muddy. So being able to spread it out and throw that ninth in, you have the ability and freedom. And that's the nice thing about your keys players, and maybe someone who's learned how to play piano, what they've written, to all of a sudden say, you have freedom to play the ninth note. It's kind of like, what? And, it goes everything against like year one of piano lessons, right? Play what's on the page. But that's the joy. And you can even say it's the freedom in Christ that we have, right? By grace we have been saved. Good question. Any other questions? Cool. I'm going to get into some tools then. So knowing those things, then you start to mess with the sounds, right? If you're just playing keys, you're playing piano, that's part one. And you can take really any keyboard, and this is a Casio keyboard, and to be honest, I'm not playing it through the Casio sounds. So hopefully that piano sounded nice to you, because I'm using Sunday Sounds. This is an app that was created by this company, Sunday Sounds. It's a guy from Iowa that utilized MainStage. MainStage is a very popular program used by musicians the world around. It's a live music playing software that's $30 on the Apple Store. You do have to have a Mac to have MainStage, so that's the caveat. They make you buy the $2,000 laptop. But more recently, and I'll show you this, Sunday Sounds developed a standalone app outside of MainStage that works for iPad. Way cheaper than a laptop computer, and still does some of the same things. So I'm going to demonstrate those a little bit before I get into tracks here. So this is my MainStage template. This is actually what Chase was playing on. I had can somebody shut the lights off back there? A little easier to see. Thank you. I was playing the worship piano here that had the tone all the way up. A little bit of a whirly EP, electric piano underneath it just to give it some depth. And then a pad kind of underneath that too. What I'm using to control it, so all of those sounds are coming from my computer, right? Which is then plugged into, and I'll get into this a little bit later, plugged into these speakers to make it work. And then I'm using this controller. I could use the keyboard, but if it doesn't have any buttons or anything, I'm sorry I can't raise it up more. I'll show you more after. This controller then to control all of these levels. So if I wanted to turn up or down those things, I can do so. So demonstrating that. So if I take some of the tone out of the piano, it becomes more hollow, right? Which is a very modern sound, to kind of hollow out your piano. You can't take that pad out. Or if I just take out the piano altogether and play the whirly, a little tremolo in there. Right, all in the key of D. That way. And you can change your sound completely on the next song, right? Then we're going to play a B3 organ. Changing your sound up all within the same program. You can set those patches to different things within MainStage. So each of these buttons are pressable. Each of these sounds are interchangeable with different instruments. You can layer your sounds. So a lot of times if you have a pad, if you're playing some high synth or something like that, you really don't want the pad up there as you're arpeggiating really fast, because then it's just going to swell. You can slide that down to the bottom of the piano to only play the notes that you play, which is really significant and helps lessen the muddiness of your sound there. Yes?
Save those settings per song?
Yep, save it per song.
You're just clicking and it's like, oh, this is this song.
Command S, and I go and I find my library of that song and I plug it in like I've done it before, and it's right back where you saved it, right? So you can save to each song. So these are ones when I play Only King Forever, Your Great Name, piano sounds that I like, that I manipulate that way. Yeah, for those songs.
You're not even setting it every time. You're literally saving it to the song.
Yep.
So when you pop in a song.
Pop in my set list and they're all the sounds I'm ready to go. Yes?
On the layers,
Uh-huh.
can you have them playing different octaves? That is,
Yes, great question. So my piano here, if I want, who has small hands like me? that it's hard to reach an octave. Awesome. Glad more people raise their hand for that than church front. Great. So if I want to, I hit that, I want to play a fun, that's me playing an octave, kind of missing the note. I hit this octave button, playing a single note. Is it cheating?
No.
Do you use a capo? It's the same thing. This is capo for pianos. So there you go. So yes, octave, I can make it big. If I don't want to slam the keyboard, just make it big. Now it's a bigger sound. Yes?
I was asking, so if you have your piano sound one octave, can you have a layer playing a different octave on that same note? That is, could you
Yes.
have the pad
So right now, if I
octave of a C?
yes, if I have yes. In simple words, yes. It's all customizable within the program. I can turn all of these sounds on and play one note, and they'll all play. One more than the other. And they'll all play. And then I can select octave on one, and it's only doing it on the piano. And you could use the same instrument in multiple places. They have a fifth layer here. I usually just use 4. The other, yes?
I was going to say, do you ever adjust the sound while you're playing it? Or-
Yeah, all the time. So that's the nice thing about having the controller right there. So, for example, if I'm playing through a song, hold on. Let's see how muddy that was. Everything. And then the pastor comes up to pray, right? I can all of a sudden drop out the tone of the piano. Now it's a little more hollow. Didn't drop out the piano altogether. Still got a pad going. It's pretty low. Work in my EP. Now I'm going to Oceans.
You can save multiple patches per song. So if the song starts and it's just solo piano, and then the first chorus hits and you have the synth, instead of having to reach over and fade a synth up, you press the next button.
Yep.
It simply loads the next patch, and the synth automatically comes in, and as your bridge builds, if there's an arpeggiator or something like that again,
Yep.
hit next, and it will load the next. Start stacking.
Loads as it goes. I'm going to pause questions just real quick to show you these next things because it touches into that too. So with MainStage, and I talked to somebody at Sunday Sounds and they said they're working on this for the iPad app. It's a little bit more difficult because they're building it from scratch. But on MainStage right now, Sunday Sounds has what they call song-specific patches. So these are patches or slots in your MainStage that do a specific song or sound. For example, everybody knows Lion and the Lamb? Yes? And how it starts? I have one of my things here. You can see these are blank. What it's doing is adjusting the mod wheel. And most keyboards have a mod wheel. And at different percentage lengths, it will adjust and do all of the changes for you. So you don't have to think about it. You just have to know where the changes are. So at the beginning of the song, with the mod wheel all the way down, it has that very familiar arpeggio. And as I increase the mod wheel, it's going to go volume up. I'm playing one note. Okay, it goes. Then it goes to the bridge and that arpeggio goes away, right? So as I increase the mod wheel down here, wrong slider. Now I'm on the bridge of the song. So all of those delays, and you can hear all the delays and reverbs are built in to those patches. Each of those patches costs $9. And then you watch a video to learn how to play it. Yeah. Question?
So you start the song with the drummer,
Uh-huh.
and then your keyboard comes in,
Uh-huh.
and they're not the same tempo.
Yep, I'm going to get to that. Yes.
So
I know you told it what key you're in.
Huh?
Did you do any more programming other than telling it what key you're in? You hit a button, and obviously you said you're in G, so you hit a G, it's going to play a G chord.
Yes.
Or if you hit an E, it's going to play E minor.
Good question. So this next song-specific patch that I have it in B, and Mainstage has it to where if I play it in B, you're going to hear it in B. If I learned the video, because the video plays it in B, but they change it to A, this is capo for pianos,
That hurts my ear.
I can slide this down, and now I'm playing it, and I'm hearing it in G. Right? So Unstoppable God. And this is actually a new way to think about piano, right? And empowering some young people. I'm going to go back to B just for my sake. With this patch specifically, I'm putting that down. So it has an ARP, but it also plays full-out chords. Go down. Hold on. One second. Let me reset that sound. Well, it's not doing what I want it to do. But you can hear, besides that pad, you can hear I'm playing one note and it's filling out the chord, right?
And that's only because you told it what key you're in. You
Right.
didn't have to
I told you what's key it's in. And what's nice about these song-specific patches, and if you really dial into what Mainstage can do, is they've pre-built for you how to play the song and the chords that fill there. And the reason you can hear those chords is because when you get to the chorus of this song, there's also this lead line that you're supposed to play, right? That's present in the song. So they fill out the chord for you. Too many things clicking at once. Right, so it's filling out that space for the song. And I'm, again, just playing left hand chords there and the right hand lead. But it's able to fill that space with songs, with the sounds. Yes.
Two quick things.
Yep.
You mentioned the videos.
Uh-huh.
They're awesome. You can watch them before you buy them.
Yep.
You can attach them to the Planning Center song for your
Yep.
keyboard players to learn along whenever it's on the schedule. The second thing, they're not changing right now, but there's notes on the screen that say, hey, during verse 1 and 2, play a low octave single bass note with your left hand.
Yes.
For verse 1. And for verse 2, do this. So there's cheat notes on the screen while you play the song.
Yes.
They're not attached to your modules, but they're not changing right
Yeah, they're not touched. Correct. I have it on my set for my keyboard. But yes, they will tell you, yes, your left hand needs to play octave bass here as well. So there's visual notes. Good point.
Do you have it set up now so you can play wrong notes, or are you not allowed to play wrong notes?
Correct.
That too.
So in this song, because I'm in the key of B, there's no A.
I think you just sold the
So your keyboard player can't mess up, technically. I mean, they could do this, but something I've played with. So within Mainstage software, and this is most digital softwares, you can tell the keyboard if I hit a G note, I want you to play G, B, and D. Right? So thinking about that in a concept, I could then teach a first grader who knows how to play G, in the key of G and a single note, and I could even label it. When you see the G on the paper, hit a G, and they can fill out the entire chord. So now it's a new way to think about involving youth in your ministry, or maybe someone who's very intro into piano, but is so passionate about wanting to play on stage, and you can really get them involved well. So now it's not like, hey, take 5 years of piano lessons and then you can play. I can get you plugged in sooner rather than later, and I can make you sound good, even just by hitting simple notes. Yes?
So likely you can choose though, like if you know how to play the melody, you
Yeah.
can say, well, I just want to use the one patch because I can't use
Sure.
two melodies at the same time.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. So like I have here, if this is my set list of 5 songs, 2 of my patches I'm just going to play piano on. These other ones I'm going to play these song-specific patches that have there. And they have the tempos there, kind of your question I'll lead to, so that you can do it with your click track, so you can stay on beat for that. Just for kicks, I'll show you the Who You Say I Am patch. Turn brightness up on that. And as the song builds, right, some of those songs sound familiar. So, yes.
Question. So from the software and hardware packages you recommend, have you run into like reliability issues, like lag or lockup or something?
I've been using Sunday Sounds for main stage for 3 years. I ran them into my first issue last Sunday, but then I used the new iPad app, and it worked fine. I think it's just me. I need to update MainStage because I haven't updated it in 3 years. I've actually had a physical keyboard that a kid bumped into and the cable fell out, and it was a workstation, so it takes 2 minutes to load up. That's failed more than the MainStage rig has. So you do want to buy a reliable laptop. They have specs for you on their websites and things like that, so you have enough memory, so you have enough RAM, things like that for your computer. But if you
We had like a 7-year-old MacBook Pro that was running flawless for us. The reason we went to ditch it was the software left the computer behind.
Yeah.
And basically our keyboard player couldn't update to Sunny Keys 3 or whatever it was without updating because we weren't going to update the operating system on the computer, whatever. So,
yeah, losing your patches or whatever.
The computer was fine. We kept running Keys 2. We never had dropouts. Never had.
I used a MIDI controller in MainStage like 10 years ago, and I had all kinds of trouble with it, and I stopped using it. So mileage may vary. Though it might have been the Mac laptop, the like the RAM, to run everything.
Right, and the reason I'll caveat too, the reason I have issues is because I was running tracks and Sunday Sounds via Dante through 8 different channels of audio as well. That was lagging on me. It wasn't just MainStage.
Sounds though is an iPad app or has an iPad app?
Has an iPad app, yes.
Whereas MainStage is just the computer.
Yes. So Sunday Sounds utilizes the software called MainStage within the app, the Apple Store, and then they built their own standalone app for iPad, just called Sunday Keys. I think it's actually called Sunday Keys.
They can run independently of each other, right?
Yes, they do run independently. So if you want to do one MainStage, one iPad. Yes, and so yes, I'll mention this as well. If you have a MainStage patch, it doesn't go to the iPad yet. Right? They don't transfer yet. They are currently working on, because Apple's most recent software update has had some MainStage issues, so they are actually working on their own. This is a spoiler because I just talked to them. They are working on their own standalone MacBook app as well. MacBook app. Yes?
So if you were, like, this is all newbie stuff to you and you wanted to just get started,
Yep.
what's the bare minimum you should?
Bare minimum to get, to start off with. I'm going to show you the iPad app, and that might be a better usage, because the computer's costs $2,000 and then $30 for MainStage, and then I think Sunday Sounds is $200 a year or something to use the software. To me, that's cheap. Same thing, if you just get the app, it's a $700 laptop or iPad for a pretty nice new iPad, and then the $200 a year. So let me just plug in that real quick. Sorry for all the popping.
They run specials, don't they, where it's not necessarily per year? There's usually some deals.
Yes, and I do think you can download the app in a trial mode for free, so do that as well.
Can I play devil's advocate?
Sure.
Just what would be the benefits of spending all of this yearly money on this versus just paying $3,500 once for a Nord that could do a lot of the same?
Fantastic question, and I'm glad you asked it. It comes down to what is your context, right? And what kind of sounds are you going for? I think Nords are great. you know where the Nord is, the Lord is. That's what people say. That's what people say. It's a nice bright red piano that, in my opinion, is overpriced and actually can't do all the sounds that a software instrument does. It has a beautiful piano sound. It has a beautiful organ B3 kind of Hammond sound. I don't think it does synths very well, and I don't think it. I think the Rhodes on it are okay.
On a Nord, also you can find a sound you like and create a sample out of it and download it.
Sure. Right, and you can do the same thing in a software instrument. So in that case, they're equal. So a Nord is $3,000, $4,000. I bought a $200. This is a Casio keyboard that was probably $99, and I'm making it sound good through the software. It's basically just acting as a MIDI controller for me to play through. All right.
Also, one other thing.
Yep.
Working on a keyboard on its own and trying to do what you're doing, it's a little bit more difficult than an iPad or a computer where you can scroll and click.
Yep.
Getting through those menus.
Menus.
I have a Nord as well, but getting through those menus can be difficult, and setting everything up is a little bit more difficult.
Yep. I'll kind of point this out.
I'm not trying to be the
No, you're good.
Just
Yeah.
try to
Exactly. Good point. Yep.
I would like to defend Nord.
Sure.
They have great synth
Go for it.
sounds. They have great synth sounds, my friend.
Just giving you my opinion.
Yeah, besides going to the website and downloading other sounds, it takes a bit up front to know how to program things, but once you program things, it's doing a lot of the same stuff.
Yeah.
Where I have the song, I got 5 buttons right in the center of the keyboard to go, sound 1 for that sound, sound 2 for that song,
Yeah.
sound 3 for that song. Click, I'm on song 2.
Yep.
You know, so
That's right.
you're doing all the work before the performance, and then at the performance, it's really easy to
Yeah,
control.
to set your thing.
Yeah.
Great question. The only thing I couldn't do, I couldn't transport a Nord from Nebraska to Arizona. I was able to take my laptop and 2 iPads that carry keyboards essentially with me anywhere I go. So that's also a benefit. If you're volunteer, and this is what I started this now with a new volunteer now that the iPad ad's out. I can't have my volunteer take the Nord home, and they can't always get it. I can give them the iPad to take home. Right, and practice those transitions and practice the button changes. So then they can practice on their own computer with a $15, $20 MIDI cable. Almost every keyboard since 1970 something has a MIDI in and out, and then a USB connection. Right, so with a cable like this, you can plug it into anything.
A lot of them are also switching to just USB.
Yes, some are switching to USB, which is what I'm doing on this guy. So this is the iPad app. Looks very similar, kind of the main stage. They opened up to 5 different sections. Let me just kind of go around the app here too. They put a tonic pad, and if you've ever wanted to know what a tonic pad was, you can select your key, and it will play a soft underlaying pad underneath you. And then you can quickly change keys into your next song, and it will do so like that. You can also save each of those tonics to your different patches, so as you go between your patches, they'll fade in and out of those different keys, so you can have that pad underneath you. You don't need to tell somebody to just play a pad and see. They'll do it for you. Also in capo world, I know if you don't like capoing a keyboard, you can play in any key you want and hear it in any key you want, and also change your octave. That's one thing MainStage can't do that they did with the iPad. Because sometimes if you go from like C to B, it's like brr, it makes everything low. Just pop it up the octave, and now it sounds more like where you want it to be. I have a keyboard player on my team that cannot play in flat keys. Like he's really a guitar bass player, but skilled keyboardist, can throw some sweet gospel licks in, when he's playing, something that we have that flavor for. But we're playing an A flat because it's goodness of God, and he doesn't want to play an A flat, so he just puts it in G because that's what he knows how to play in. So it helps, and I don't have to reteach him or anything like that. Changing your BPM, all the sounds. One of the coolest things they did, and if anybody's played like a Helix, or the Nord does this as well, they have now song sections that you can tap on within your patch. So this is a patch for Great Things by Phil Wickham. And hold on, I'm going to change this because I'm playing an A, not G. Da, da, da. And so what they've been able to do, and they're timed out. So right here it says start here, right? And as I start to play the intro, this says add the ARP. So when I select that, within 2 measures, because I've set that time, it's going to add the ARP, right? So I'm going to go back to start here. See how that goes down? Play the octave. So you can have things fade in to the time that you want them to fade in. And they don't have to push the fader up to fade it in, because sometimes it's hard on a keyboard, but you can tell the software, hey, when I go to this patch, now I'll start to fade up. Chase, will you come back and just play this so I can, it's hard to, there's no sustain pedal. I'm in A, there's the chart. So now I'm adding the lead. So play that right hand up the octave. Now play low chords here, because we're building up. Now it's adding in another piano and sub bass. And now the big finish with the high at the end. Thank you. So the piano patch grew throughout the song. You added those layers of sound in throughout the song just by hitting those sections. So I, as a leader, can say, you know, I want this sound to come in during the bridge. I'll type in, and I've done that. So here I have, when we get to the instrumental, hit instrumental, because that's going to pull up that organ and the DXC piano, right? Or when I just want that EP, I'm going to completely take the piano out, so that when I'm at my default setting, just have a piano. When I hit the EP and the organ, fading into those sounds to make it easier for that volunteer. And I don't even have to have 5, but these are different snapshots that then I can set ahead of time, and they can write on their paper or their chart or in their notes or whatever to say, hey, at this point, just push this button, and here we go. I'll show you too, this is a better way to look at those different layers, right? So I don't want that organ if I'm playing a lead line up here, but if I did want that organ to go throughout the entirety of the piano, I can just slide it. Slide it over there.
And that noise when you do things...
That's the speaker.
Okay.
It's a Vizio TV speaker, and my audio interface is sitting on top of it.
Okay.
So, I know. It was a TV speaker or a crate amp for a bass player, so I went with the TV speaker and not the speakers of the projector, to just show you the sounds that it makes. You can go true stereo mono connections with that.
It just doesn't make that sound on something.
It won't. It won't make that sound.
Yeah. It's you, not me.
Correct. It's what I had to work with.
Absolutely.
And if I had a DI, I'd probably pad it and be fine. We're 45 minutes in. Going to transition to tracks. Any other questions on keys?
I'll say too, they do make a guitar version of this too.
They do. Yes.
Really interesting. Yeah, we're gonna do that.
I was not part of that talk. I own it. They've kind of stopped working on it, and I asked them about it. I know. I won't talk you out of it, because if you have the computer and can do the things, it loads a lot slower than Sunday Keys. That's my only caveat.
Acoustic and electric?
It has an acoustic simulator, but
Well, you've got to play electric.
it's more for electric guitar.
Okay.
Yep.
I'm just curious how many outs you have there, and is it mixed in stereo? Can you
Yep.
take the click out of a different channel?
Yep.
So how many outs?
Depending on your interface, and I'll kind of talk about that, you can go here. I can show you here. So within the settings here, I think with this app, the iPad app is just stereo, or you can choose mono left or mono right. Same with the tonic output. You can do it that way. It also might just be because I'm plugging into a smaller Focusrite. Depending on your audio interface, you could send each sound out separately. If you go into the software and do that, I think it might bog down your buffer size. So I recommend to do the stereo and really mix it in kind of yourself based on your patches. At my church, we have a Dante system. And I'll kind of talk about Dante a little bit later, but it's all Ethernet based, so I don't have to use an audio interface. It's just straight from my computer to the board. Yes?
Can you use like volume pedals and switch pedals for things like that?
Absolutely, yes. So you can add plugins. I should point out that they have different MIDI capabilities, so you can make any note possible, but then also done in the settings, you can select however many MIDI controllers that you have plugged in, that what functions you want them to do. So if you can have multiple foot pedals, whatever, yes. So it's all capable of using the devices that you have. So I'm just kind of showing you, if you just have an iPad and you have any keyboard, you can make it sound like this or download sounds like this as well. Okay. Any last questions before, as I'm transitioning back to my other computer?
Can you show us after you're done how, like, can we take a look at your connections?
Yes, and I'm going to talk about the connections during this half as well. Okay. Awesome. Oh, I should probably plug it back in. Okay. Turn that off for a second. It's not hitting. Okay, so now I'm transitioning a little bit into tracks for worship. And now tracks may not work for everybody. There's a difference between track and click as well. But this is ways that I use it, what I recommend it for. I also talked to Steve Young on this, and he gives his opinions, and I'll tell you his on tracks and stuff too. So why use click and how is what I'll cover in this. Why use tracks and how, and different tools that I've used. There's a ton of tools out there for this to fit your context, but I'm going to show you a little bit of what it takes to do that. Why do we use click track, right? Biggest reason is unity. How many of us want unity in our churches and our worship teams, right? So click helps us stay unified. We're all listening to the same thing so we can play at the same time. Keeps the team on time. You won't have to start out wrong tempos anymore. How many of us have started a song, we finished a song, that was great, and now I have to go sing, "How great is our God." 1, 2, 3, 4, and now we're in. Right? You had that gap, you had to figure it out, and then you're like, I started too fast, and now we're off the entire song until we're done. Right? I don't have to worry about tempos in my head anymore, because I can hit go on a click track, and now the tempos are set for me. Right? So after hearing a measure, we went from 136 BPM to 55 BPM, and I don't have to count it in my head. Right? Those are big dynamic changes, and when you're amped up and you're glad you're leading worship and praising the Lord, it's hard to then slow down and count out a tempo for a drummer, or let them count out 55 beats per minute in 2 seconds. Right? For click tracks, I'm gonna say. And I saw through the polls, if you hadn't answered the polls, there are some people that are using tracks, some people using click. That's great. There are some people still using wedge monitors. So I'm going to try to cover all those bases. So if you are someone that uses wedge monitors, you do have to use in-ears so that you're not getting this coming out of the monitor for your whole congregation to hear, right? That's the nice thing about in-ear monitors, is it allows us to have a metronome. Metronomes have been around for a while. Right? They started measuring tempos in the 1800s, and actually it was Beethoven, I believe, that commissioned someone to create this, so that when his songs were played, when his pieces were played, they could play to the tempo that he wanted them to be played. Because Beethoven played pretty quick, and not a lot of people could, so he put his tempo on it so that they'd stop bogging it down, right? Because they'd be like, man, what piece is this? It sounds slow and terrible. No, it's meant to be played faster. So he helped commission that so that we could have tempo and put that on the sheet music so that people could play to that beats per minute and practice to go that way. So in-ears are a big help for that. What are in-ears, you ask? These things that get stuck in your ear sometimes. These are budget ones, and believe me, I'm skimming the surface on this. There are tons of YouTube videos. Churchfront has a video on this. Sunday Sounds has a video on this. All are useful for use. I'm giving you the budget options. These are $14 in-ears on Amazon that have one driver that I suggest for all my singers that are getting in, because that's really all they need. These are the ones I have. These are MX Pros that have 4 drivers in each ear and detachable and customizable at $200. So that's not a budget. These are KZ. They range anywhere between $20 and $100, I think. So depending on how many drivers, that's how many speakers are in your ear, so that you can hear high, middle, low, right? So if you're a singer, you don't need a lot of low end, right? You're mostly treble. One driver's going to be fine. If you're a bass player, drummer, you're going to want at least 2 drivers, so you can get a difference between high and low sound, right? So you can hear the decibels that are in there. So research more of that for in-ears. Jake Churchfront told me to say this. Please wear both ears. I agree. It helps with your hearing. I've had it too where a singer pulls out an ear because they want to hear the congregation and they're holding the mic up, and then the click starts going through the microphone because their in-ear's sitting on their shoulder. Just wear both. If you can add an ambient mic to pick up congregation and put it in the ears, it helps. But try to wear both ears to protect your hearing. And just don't take them out, because there's nothing. I mean, you see it on live shows all the time. The diva stars are popping out their in-ears because they're good enough. Whatever. 2 cents on that. So then, if you're thinking about plugging in, right, to hear those things, to hear it to your soundboard, if you have wedge monitors, most of you guys probably know you have a cable, whether it's 1/4-inch XLR cable that then goes to your soundboard, because all the sounds are then coming back to your wedge monitors. Essentially, think of this as a wedge monitor, right? But now instead of a giant, kind of ugly looking, because they don't make the back of those wedges look nice. Let's be real. If Behringer designs a nice looking with a flower coming out of it wedge, maybe. But these are way smaller. I don't think I brought one with me. But fit kind of on your pocket, loop on your belt. They work. You plug in your XLR cable, plug it in your headphones, and it is your wedge monitor just for your ears, right? So this is priced low, middle, high. This has just one. It's passive. Doesn't need batteries. You plug it in. You probably have to crank up the sound coming from your soundboard because it's passive to that. Some of these are stereo that have multiple things. This one's stereo. You can plug 2 in, so you can go stereo and balance left or right ear for different things like that. This one works plugged in, has a DC, works with a battery, so you can take it on the road. But these are wired solutions to get to your wired. So who uses wired in-ears? I have drummers usually. They don't move much. They sit for the most part, so I can wire them in for their in-ears. Bass players, I've met a few bass players that move, but don't move much, right? Sometimes guitar players, you know, if I have maybe players that are more instrumental towards the back, I can wire them in, and they're pretty happy with it. They make extender cables too, so if you need to go 5-10 feet, you can extend them so they're not. Just be sure, and I do this all the time, unplug your in-ears before you walk away. Otherwise, you get that. I've done it a million times. So this is kind of budget. I think these are $100, but anywhere to $200 in there. Then there's wireless options, right? This is what you see a lot of times. You'll have your in-ears. This is the package that kind of goes together, the PSM 300s. You have this that you put in your rack, so that's plugged inable. And then you have this that runs on batteries that your singers. We use this for all our singers. There's people that need the wireless that, you know, are moving around, not by a music stand, so that they can have their ears attached to them at all times. Make sure you check your batteries. This is one that Jake talks about on his channel on Churchfront. I bought one of these. Works pretty well. X5, it's about $200 wireless. You just plug this into your floor box, if you will. They say about 50 to 90 feet it'll work. I haven't had that great experience with it to where I can be far away, but I've been 15 feet away from my stage box with it plugged in, line of sight. It has multiple channels. I have probably 2 or 3 musicians that I talked into this, because the nice thing about this too is then if you gig outside of church, you can plug it in and have wireless in-ears. That's what I do. So I just bought my own system outside of the church for $200, and so I can make anything wireless to listen to that way. And it works pretty good if you're pretty close that way. Controlling your in-ears. So this is a big part of it. So if you have these different portions, right? I hope I'm not losing you. This is where I lost my wife. So this is just for in-ears again. We're not on the key stuff. We're on click and tracks. So to be able to control what you hear in your in-ear monitors, you need some sort of device that will control it. A lot of things that you'll see are like physical soundboards or consoles that look like these two up top that are plugged into, that is assigned to your station, that you then select and turn up. So if I'm on channel 1, I select channel 1, I turn it up. If my friend's on channel 2 and I don't want to hear them because they sound terrible, I turn them completely down. Right? I don't have to tell the sound person, can you turn him down? I don't want him in my ears. Right? You can do it yourself discreetly because you are the master and diva of your own sound mix, and it's not bothering anyone. What I really petition for, these are pretty expensive. I didn't look up the prices, but I know they're not cheap. And if you have multiple musicians, then you get like 6 or 8 of those. These work A and B, so you can do 2 mixes per device, so you're cutting down your cost of how many of these you need, and they're kind of ugly on stage. We have a Yamaha console. We use the TF5 currently, and they have a Android and Apple app that works. Because I know everybody that comes to my rehearsals has their phone. Right? And if they don't have a phone, I can log into their mix, or I can give them an iPad and they can set their own mix. Because this controls their aux on the soundboard. They turn it up or down on their phone just by connecting to the soundboard. So I don't have to buy these third-party things. But you want to make sure if you're using in-ears that you have control. Right? Because if I'm a singer, I don't need to hear the bass player's notes. Right? It's nice, I want to, but don't muddy your mix. You don't need to hear the bass player. But you do need to hear the click track. Right? You want to make sure that you have control of that. It's not blowing your eardrums out, so you can change the levels of those things. So those are some of the things that are kind of required when you start thinking about clicks, when you start thinking about in-ear tracks. You need a way to get it from the soundboard to you. You need a way to get it from the soundboard to your ears. You need a way to control that sound so you know what you're hearing. And then you can start getting to different apps for click. These are 2 free options, I believe. iTempo. It used to be iTempo, now I think it's just Tempo. Is a metronome app. Is Tempo?
I think it's $2.
$2 now?
I think so.
Oh, they raised the price.
But the better one is like
Okay. I think I still have the free one. From when I started using tracks, I still have a Mighty Fortress set on here. 125 beats per minute. It's a metronome app, but then I can select song 2. Now I'm on Thy Strong Word in 6/8. Right? Easy if you can plug in dongle to your phone. You start with that. Start with something simple and free that just gets your people on click track. Loop Community has an app called Prime. It is also free for the most basic. That's what I started using and grew into tracks with it, which is awesome. Yes?
I would say, too, something that I started out my band doing just to get them started on clicks. Just to get them on tempo was, who has Planning Center?
Planning Center, yep.
Music Stand.
Music Stand has a metronome app. Good point.
Metronome on there, and you can adjust it however you want to. So I can tell my drummer to set it to 96 BPM, and then he can have it run through his thing. He can have it run through the system, or he can just have it in his ear, and you just say, you keep the tempo. You just hear it in your ear. You don't have in-ears. But then when he swipes to the next song, it's changed the tempo.
Good point. Yeah, I probably should have said that. They have a tempo app up at the top of that. Of the app.
That could be in the drummer's ears, or if you have in-ears, you can send it to the...
Good point. And that's my next point. So why do you use tracks, right? Getting out of, that's kind of click tracks, and I'll get into how you set that up. But why use tracks then for worship? And tracks are those extra sounds that you hear coming from something. A lot of people call it karaoke. A lot of people might call it... background tracks. Remember back in the old days when somebody wanted to sing I Can Only Imagine, and you had to put that CD in, and it was the accompaniment track for it, and it had all the strings and all the things that are beautiful. It's kind of doing the same thing, but now we use technology with the click track, and we enhance the sound. So why use tracks? If you only have 2 people in the band, if you're a church that's pretty small and has a singer and an acoustic guitar player, I would say, my opinion, take it for what it's worth, don't use tracks. Use your identity of what you are. If you're a 2-person band and you have an acoustic guitar, lean into that, because they might be coming to your church because you have a small thing, and they don't want to hear all the 4 electric guitar tracks that Hillsong has. This was the wise words that Steve Young from Concordia Irvine gave to me that pass on to you. He doesn't like tracks. He's very much for musicians, always. And in his opinion, he was someone that recorded and was a person that played on those tracks. The thing about tracks is like, oh, well, I hear this Amazing Grace, and you got to play that riff, right? There's nobody, kind of like I said, the 9 note, right? The 9th. You don't have to play that melody. Yes, your congregation's going to attach to it as part of the song, sure. But that's only because that electric guitar player showed up on a Tuesday to record that riff, right? If he could have come on a Wednesday, he might have made it sound different. 9 times out of 10, Phil Wickham, some of those guys didn't write a lot of those parts or intros or licks. They made that up in the studio on the day, right? So we're holding the holy grail of that studio musician when they're like, oh, that was just cool. Let's keep that in there. So to that extent, you don't necessarily have to do those sounds. So you don't have to use tracks. However, do we need to sound like the record? No. There's nothing that says you have to sound exactly like Chris Tomlin, especially if in the keys that he sings. You don't have to necessarily sound like that. Is there reason for sounding like it or using some of those cool sounds like I showed you, Lion and the Lamb? Yeah, I mean, they're cool. Somebody made them. They're creative. They're great. It can enhance worship or it can detract from worship, depending on your context. My philosophy for what I'm using tracks for currently is to just enhance, right? If there's something in the band, in the record that has like 4 guitars in it, and I have one guitarist that can only play power chords, I might throw one in there at a lower level, just so it gets picked up in there. I ran into a situation at Christmas Eve. I had 2 electric guitar players, and one of them, they had each practiced their own specific parts, right? That were very, very unique and little things like that. Day before Christmas, guitar player sliced his finger open. The one you need to play on your left hand to hold down a string, right? That right there. So I said, all right, turn on the track for his parts, right? So just to fill out that sound, and my other guitar player didn't have to learn completely new parts. Was God still praised? Yes. Did anybody in the congregation really notice that it was a track playing it? Not really. So they're cool. Some of them have cool whooshy sounds. I was talking to Ian Moore yesterday, and he was using the Lighthouse track, and it actually has like waves and seagulls in the tracks, I think. It's like, is that necessary? No. But are you trying to tell the story where you're putting your people on the beach with a lighthouse? Yeah, maybe it works in your context. So use some discretion for there. The biggest reason, though, besides sounds, I use tracks is for automation, right? Automating my slides in ProPresenter, automating my lights, and you can automate more things, right? So if I am programming specific lights to go at a specific time in the song, I'm probably going to get the track, because then I can line them up so that when I do my 4 Christmas Eve services, every time I play that part of the song, the lights are going to be on time, the slides are going to be on time. And I'm going to show you that a little bit. I'm not going to spend the rest of our time on it, but just to demonstrate a little bit of those things. Getting into the tools for that, Multitracks has a great option. They use an app called Playback. There's a part of me that feels remiss. I did not jump on this train right away, because now they have a cool partnership with ProPresenter, to where you can buy an all-in-one package that has the tracks and the slides and the automation for like money, and saves you time. So if that's you and you don't have time or figure out, you can do that. Buy from them. I have a couple tracks. The other one is Loop Community, and the Prime app works on only Apple devices. So whether it's iMac or iPad, works kind of the same way. They have some other tools here to talk about. So they have a MIDI controller too, that you can click on, use as a foot pedal to control your track rig, and then also they have something called Track Rig. So if you wanted, somebody asked before, the multiple outputs for things, they have a device that a lot of even touring musicians use to plug in your multiple outputs. So if I want the drums to be going to the soundboard here, electric guitar going to the soundboard here, and you have a sound mixer, so you can send 100% of your tracks, and then your sound mixer can mix them like they're a live instrument. So you can individualize your tracks through the Track Rig. Gives you that possibility if you have an analog system like that. This is Church Front's drawing. I did label it. This is Jake Goslin's drawing to me of, here's your playback device. This is how you do click, right, or tracks. You take your playback device with some kind of 1/8" cable, 1/4" cable, plug it in, try to go stereo to where your click track, it goes in one channel, and maybe your tracks, or if you're not using tracks, just click track, go in another channel. You want your click, and if you use tracks as well, it has cues to tell you when to go, so you're playing with the musicians in the tracks. It'll say intro, 2, 3, 4, so you know when to start, and they lead you in. I've had some of my singers love it, because they really don't know, are we going, like Who You Say I Am? Super confusing song when it comes to bridges and choruses, because they repeat forever. So it's nice to know, bridge 2, ready to go. Oh, I know where I am. It's telling you in your ears. But you don't want to send that to the main mix. I mean, you could tell your congregation 2, 3, 4, but you want that to go to your musicians in their ears, and then you only send the backing tracks to this. A little more professional drawing, Loop Community for the win. They actually showed their app an audit. This is a headphone jack into 2 DIs, one that's labeled clicking cues, going to different places like that. If you reach out to them, they can send you these too. This is one that they recommend if you're just starting for click tracks and you don't have a way to get it to all your musicians, at least send it to the drummer, right? Because if you can send it to your drummer, then he can stay with the click and hold everybody else accountable. I've seen this work. I started this way too. It was a slow build. So at that point, you plug it in the same way, but then you just send it to another mixer for your drummer when everything else in your tracks go that way. So if you're still using wedge monitors or things like that, at least get on the same page with the tracks with your drummer so that you're staying on. Yes?
So when you use the track and it's saying, intro, chorus, can you change the song?
You can. Yes, you can change the arrangement. And I'll show that. What are we going to? 3:30? Yep. Okay, I still got a little bit of time. Good. Look for drummers. Yes, I'll get to that. Connectivity. This was a question earlier. Ways to connect. Different ways to do it. This is your first cheap option. I'm remiss that phones and iPads no longer have headphone jacks. Dust was the only reason Apple gave. So it's a 1/8" cable to stereo, 1/4" cable. This is a Focusrite. Pretty familiar if you've seen these red boxes, similar to the Red Nord. They like to follow that marketing scheme. I'm just kidding. Nord's fine. Focusrites, you can get them in different ins and out options. Usually it's just, and a lot of audio interfaces were designed for digital audio workstations so that you could plug in like your acoustic guitar and put it in your software to record. That's the original purpose of them. Now we're finding out we want it to go the other way, to use some of these interfaces for live music to go more outputs. So there's kind of a change in the community. This is an awesome tool. I actually used part of my budget to order one of these because it's awesome. It's a USB in and XLR out. So I can go straight from my computer or iPad straight to my soundboard. I don't have to configure an audio interface. Plug in, plug out. They're like almost $300. So it's a pretty penny, but saves you from, audio interfaces run between $100 and $200 too. But works just like a DirectBox for a guitar player, just for your software keys. And then I'll just touch on quickly Dante. If you're overhauling your system and you can do Dante, I say do it. I love it. It sends everything digitally through an RJ45 Ethernet jack. So we have it to where our soundboard has a Dante card built into it. We have our stage box on the stage that has all of our 32 inputs from the stage plugged in, and we sent one Ethernet cable to the soundboard and plugged it in, and they all talk to each other. So then through my software instrument, I can tell it I want it to go through 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 via Dante, and it just goes directly to those channels. I don't have to physically plug in things. Yes?
How long have you had your Dante?
Since we moved into our building 3 years ago.
Recently, I've been looking for one, and I can't find one.
For a Dante card? Yeah.
Just say they had major supply chain issues.
Supply chain issues for Dante. So.
I'm saying, you're saying you're within a year to 2 years.
Yeah. Whew. Get in line for Dante.
It's a lot of stuff. It's a lot of months out.
Yeah, it's a lot of months out. So if you're planning for the future, get in line now, I guess. I'm just touching on that because I use it and I love it. There's also something too of signal loss, because if you're going digital instrument to then a software connection or a hardware connection, then back to a software connection, then finally to your speakers, you lose a little bit. I have found that going straight digital all the way until it reaches the speakers, I get a little more crispness to my sound, and it sounds, I don't get the hiss, right, that you guys heard through this, through all the hardware, different stuff. So there's like that. Worship track and keys. This is my email. I'll just put it up here now in case you have more questions or need to talk to me or anything like that. Go ahead and take a picture, jot that down, and then I'll show you what I use for clicking tracks in the time that we have left. Yes?
Maybe a dumb question. I don't know much about this stuff.
Yeah.
We have a traditional worship at our church.
Uh-huh.
Is there a source for tracks from the hymnal?
Not yet. Not that I've found. Good question, though. I think I saw CPH has like some discs or something, and I've seen some organs that you can like plug in a thing and you go. Yeah. So I haven't used it. Yeah. Good question. Maybe an idea for somebody? Anybody? Start a thing. I actually did ask. I mean, neither Jake nor David from Sunday Sounds are Lutheran people, so I asked them that, and they're like, "What's a hymnal?" So.
If you're gonna cover this, I apologize. So we use Loop right now for our clips and our background tracks. And one thing we're trying to get into more is, transitioning from song to song and maybe implementing our worship elements into the song and things like that. Do you have advice for how to smoothen those things out while using Loop? Because right now, our biggest problem with Loop is that it takes a long time to go from song to song, because especially the count off is a long time.
Interesting. Yeah. I know you can change the end times. And your fade outs down here, and that's what I've done. And you can change the start times too. You might lose some of that intro stuff. And I agree, when you're trying to rearrange the arrangement, you can't change your intro and ending, which I think is dumb. I will tell you this, because I did talk to Derek from Loop Community. They're working on their new app to revamp this. That's a ton of changes. It's a lot of work in progress. They're going to release it the day after Easter, so that no one's trying to figure it out for Easter.
Unrelated to playback, just did an update, and they have basically at the end of the song, you can tell it to continue to click and stay in the song. So you finish the song, it stays in at 85 beats a minute or whatever.
Yeah.
And then your drummer or whoever's controlling it can just hit the chorus, and it'll say chorus 2, and your band comes back in. So
Yep.
if you're going to pray at the end, you're going to do liturgy, you're going to do whatever.
And I don't know, and this is a bad. Wish I could zoom in. Yeah, playback by multi-tracks. And this does have a flow. I don't know if have you messed with the flow button over here? So you can change so they have it to where you can just have it stop. You can have it go to the next track layered over each other, which is that icon, and it's really hard to see. They have it to where you can crossfade to your next track. They have it to where the click will keep going, kind of like playback, where it'll stay in the same tempo, and it'll wait for you to change the song. So that took me a while to find too, but just clicking on that helps you find it. So what I did for the longest time, because this is a free app, was I just put in click tracks. You can add a song like this, go to click add a song, click add a song, and then you can just click tracks, I think. Or no, just add click track, right? And if you're adding a click track, you just type in the song, the BPM you want, the time signature, whether you want it single time or double time, and if you want that lead accent on. What do you mean by lead accent? Well, let me tell you. So this is a track for the song Thank You, Jesus in 74 beats per minute. Sounds like this. It's just coming out of my computer. Right? Pretty easy. I can increase the tempo down here. So if I wanted to make it faster, and these will save to your click tracks. So then you can drop in your set list, all your different click tracks to start and stop. Right? You can also adjust, if I wanted to make this double time, I would go into the settings of this track, click subdivision, double time, and now it's 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and and it's got that high click at the top to kind of show you where that beat 1 is each time, right? So here's where I get the question, well, doesn't that sound annoying in your ears? If you get off of it, yes. There's something in a musician's brain, and it takes time to get used to. I'll be honest, if you're using click for the first time, because you have an incessant click in your ear. But if your entire band is tight and on time, it honestly fades away to the background. It goes completely out of your ears. It still plays, and there'll be times when I feel like we're good, we're building in a song, and I'm okay if we stretch that tempo, so I can just shut the click off. And then the drummer knows, we've communicated, that if the click goes off, you're the tempo guy, right? And if we get off the click, because I'm going to stop it, I'm not going to say we get back on, stop the click, now we're all following you. He's the default rhythm for our stuff. And I get the question too, well, what if my drummer doesn't want to play with a click? In my experience working with drummers using a click, 9 times out of 10, if they don't like the click, it's because they have trouble staying with it. Let's be honest, a lot of songs, 136 beats per minute, it's hard to stay on that for a 4 or 5 minute song. One of the things that really worked for me with a drummer that I had was I would tell him, you are a great drummer, you stay on time really well, this is for me. When I'm playing acoustic, I get way too excited and I rush the tempo, and I don't want you to save me every time. So I'm going to use this for me so that I can stay on time, and we're going to use this together to build unity in the band. It has now gotten to a point with that same drummer that I shut off the click on a song because I'm like, he's got it, and he's like, can you keep that on? I need it for the bridge here coming up. The other thing that I told him is, if you can fit any fill in there that you want if you stay on the beat, and he'll stretch me on it. He'll get everything he wants in it. So, work with it, just like anything. If you were adding a tambourine to your worship set, something new, right? You're not just going to be like, all right, you're playing the tambourine, here we go, right? You're going to work with it. You're going to take your time to implement it. Use that rehearsal time. This is time to mess up. Not going to work the first time, but definitely start with a click track before you go to tracks, right? Start with click first. This is Prime by Loop Community. Yep. So when you get into your tracks, this is a multi-tracks track. This is one that you can't edit. Let me clarify. Within the multi-tracks app, you can edit it. This was one I downloaded before I learned about Loop Community stuff. And it's just the way it is. So it's A to B. Here's the track. Go.
You can add markers to it.
You can add markers to it.
Funny time signature.
And Lion Lamp, I tried on that one. I gave up. It's hard to get it to the right thing at the right time.
You can delete sections and move around sections.
Yep. So this is one that I downloaded from Loop Community through their website, loopcommunity.com. You can buy different tracks. Depending on who the track is from, it can be anywhere from $20 to $40 per track. So it's pretty expensive, but they're paying the musicians for all that too. You can buy tracks that specifically only work in Prime, and that's kind of what I've done. So if I stop using Prime, I've lost those. But they're $10 cheaper than just buying the WAV files and filling up my file library. So these are just stored in the cloud on Prime's thing. And so you can see each of these colored sections go with a different part of the song, right? So if I'm actually going to turn this back on and see if it works. Did it light up? Yep. Let's go devices, play through the Scarlett.
Intro, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Okay, cool. It's only hearing the one part. I will abandon that.
3, 4, 5, 6.
It's because I have my out set up differently. Oh well. Abandoning ship on that option. So you'll hear it out of my speakers here. Actually, wait. Let's see if this works. We'll go through the projector. Yeah.
Intro, 3, 4, 5, 6.
And that track's off.
Tracks output is going to probably signal 2 and mono, maybe. There you go.
So they're in there. They're just pretty low. So it's going to play the background tracks all through there. You would send it to your different areas. So you can hear the guy talking to you to go through different things. And you might say, well, I'm stuck in this formation. So whether you're in the moment of the song, and you can use different MIDI pedals for this, but if you wanted to go back to that pre-chorus, if you select that pre-chorus now, it's going to talk you back into that section of the song.
Pre-chorus, 3, 4, 5, 6.
And now you're back at the pre-chorus. So you can jump to anywhere in the song, and then you can edit your arrangement to add in another verse or a section, or delete a section, or move a verse over here, different parts like that you can do within Loop Community. So especially for who's done like a Maverick City song, 10 minutes long? Delete, move a bridge over here, right? Make it 4 or 5 minutes, finish the song another time, kind of thing. Cut the song to be what you want. It tells you the length of the song, kind of at the bottom too for your whole track. As you shorten your track, it'll tell you where it's going there as well. Questions on that so far before I get to another level? Yes?
Buying the tracks, do you get copyright permission for streaming and all that?
Good question. So CCLI now has a license for streaming using tracks, and any Loop Community track is built into that. So if you buy the streaming license, anything by Loop Community and Multitracks, I think, and a few other third-party ones, all those tracks are legal for you to use and stream.
So now they actually do recording for you.
Yes.
Recording for you. They don't have to do it. Anytime you add a song into your set list, it automatically records it.
You connect your CCLI license number, and they'll report that you use tracks on that song. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I would start with click first. That way you don't necessarily have to go to a section. If you end up like leaving and you're still on a G, but then the guide gets thrown off at a certain time, just so you can get back on. An MD mic or a music director mic, if you have somebody who's just the only thing their mic is doing, it's not going to the house, but it's going to the in-ears, that can also help. Like, okay, band, intro, go. Play a G chord now. Having that kind of guide as well through your in-ears is possible when you're using in-ear monitors, and can be helpful and can help you transition to tracks as well. I started with just a click track, and I started with tracks now. I don't have an MD mic. That's something I think we're going to work towards, starting to implement that. But I'll do a click track now, and my singers will say, can I get cues on this? And if you're a pro member, so they have different licensing too. I pay $10 a month for a Loop Community Pro. You can get click and cues for a track for free through Loop Community. I haven't bought them yet. It's on my horizon. I don't know if you can arrange it differently through that. I think some you can, some you can't maybe. But that's kind of a new thing too in their new app. They're going to introduce some of that. So I talked about kind of automation. This is a little tiny thing, and if you're not using tracks, maybe this isn't for you. This is what I use it for. You see all these green lines? These are ones that I painstakingly took the time, not painstakingly, like once through the song. But I went in there, and they each have a number, and it's kind of hard to see, sorry, it's so big. It's saying 19. So these are each MIDI notes that are telling the software Pro Presenter what slide to go to. So 19 means slide number, and then I have 19.1, 19.2, 19.3, 19.4. Are we connected? See if you can connect it. I was going to have Joe help me demonstrate it to working with Pro Presenter. But as it plays through the song, then it will go to the slide I want as it goes. So every time that I do this song in this track, and I have that in my Pro Presenter, it will automatically do the lyrics in the time that I want. Right? There was another session earlier about having your slides be late to where you can do that. Yes, question?
So Jake's got a video on this.
Yep.
Our slide operators are kind of concerned as I'm getting ready to implement this over time.
Uh-huh.
What happens if the automation software crashes?
Right.
Because Jake has it on there, it's like, oh look, you don't just have to have like one of each in there, and then the automation software will jump everywhere you need to.
Good point.
I was thinking just keep it the same arrangement like you normally would. So in case it fails, your slide operator can take those.
That's what I do. I do that exactly right. So, and I'll show you here if we're connected yet. In Pro Presenter, where did my Pro Presenter go? There's Pro Presenter. So yes, I do the arrangement tab right through here. And if you want to learn more about Pro Presenter, my next session that starts at 4, we'll do more time in Pro Presenter. Little pitch. I keep the same arrangement. So yes, and I've had it to where I set it via Wi-Fi versus direct, and with 800 people in the room, it didn't work, so then they jumped in, and it was huge. Because then I have a redundant system to where I have MIDI light lighting cues on my slides. So then when it hits the slides, it hits my lighting computer. But that way, if my track reg stops working, my lyric operator can still click through it, and my lights will still be on time. So, yes?
So, maybe you don't know. I like Proclaim better than Pro
Sure.
Presenter. Does
Yep.
Proclaim do this?
Should work the same way. Anything that's able to take MIDI notes will work the same way. Yeah, great question. So if you're using Proclaim, if you're using Media Shout, I think has MIDI capabilities, maybe. And ProPresenter didn't have this. It was kind of an add-on thing you had to purchase until ProPresenter 7, and then they implemented it, which is awesome. I was like jumping on that train and doing that tour automated. So now, if Joe plays that track for Firm Foundation. He's wirelessly connected to my computer, so then when it clicks through the tracks, it's going to change slides for me. So verse, and they're always going to be on time when I play that track. Cool. Clicking noises. So it's going through that.
Have like a syllable or two leads.
Yep. So I go in there and I tell it when I want it to change the slide. So now that I've set that, and that's what each of these notes were for. Good question. So yes, that's very important. Make sure, right? I don't want the verse 1 slide happening at verse. I want it when it starts to say verse 2, 3, 4. So I can slide this to wherever I want within that section. So I go through and I put where I want those slides to do. And now once I save it, the next time I save this arrangement and pull up that song, all my slides are ready to go. Eureka. I did this for Vacation Bible School. This is my hack that I'm going to tell you all. How many of you guys use Group for VBS? Cool. They have instrumental tracks that they send with you without singing. I put those instrumental tracks into GarageBand and record it. I put a click to it, so it was in tempo. And don't get me started, Group doesn't always use the same tempo throughout the entire song. Please fix it. And then I just recorded myself saying, "You guys are great. Verse 2, 3, 4," and recorded myself, and then set up all the slides. So now with the youth or whenever they do some of those VBS songs, and they hit go, the slides are going to be ready for those singers. They can do it with the kids. I don't have to have another person clicking through slides. So when they wanted to practice, when they were playing, they could pick whatever song. The kids are like, "We want this song." They could click that song, and the slides would go with it. So it was huge. I didn't have to have somebody there. I didn't have to be there to go set up, pick the song, whatever. You save some automation that way. Again, that's a whole nother level of doing automation that you grow into. Start with click tracks. I'm trying to cover a wide range of things to do because I think this is important, especially as we kind of grow in the church to do different things and be able to be impactful in our music ministry. You can see too, like I mentioned, I don't have all the tracks turned up all the way. I have a lot of them off because I have a bass player, I have an acoustic player, I have a drummer. I don't have 4 electric players. I got one that's good, so I turned that one off. But I added, some of these that are just chords, I'll layer in low, and then my sound person mixes the tracks. I've done it to where I'll run choir on a separate channel, just kind of boost the congregation a little bit, that he keeps kind of low, and then tracks, or if we have certain sounds we want up, you can layer it all through that way. You do that too. In this app, you can tell what MIDI control, what buttons you want to push, and then what outputs, where you want to send each of the channels that you're sending. You'll also notice, like if you're doing click and tracks, they made the click and cues red, and these blue. So if you're using like a headphone jack, you have your right and your left, red right, blue left. So hey, make sure your right isn't going to the speakers, your blue left is going to the speakers. Only your in-ears want the clicking cues. Cool? We are at 3:30 and I covered a lot of ground. So thank you for bearing with me and getting through that. The room got a little hot and stuffy too, so I apologize for that. Not that I had control over it. But thank you so much for this. If you have any questions, I'll be here for a little bit because I'm in the same room for the next session. I appreciate all you guys learning from that, so thank you so much.